محمد الهادي البشير قد جاءنا حقا نذير.
الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين وصلى الله وسلم على سيدنا Muhammad وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. This is the 10th episode of the series on why Islam is true. I'd like to step back for a moment to recap what I have shown in previous episodes. I began this series by clarifying the meaning of Islam in the statement why Islam is true. And I explained that when I make the claim that Islam is true, I don't mean by Islam what news reports say that Muslims believe or do, nor do I mean what you might have been pressured to do as a Muslim in your childhood if you were raised as a Muslim, nor do I mean saying the confession of faith, nor do I mean a struggle for peace or justice. What I mean by Islam is none of these things. What I mean by Islam is the claim that God created the universe, put us in it for a great purpose, and sent us messengers to tell us our purpose so that we might gain eternal happiness in our life after death. Now, this claim comprises a series of sub-claims about God, about people who claimed to be God's messengers, about the purpose of our existence, and about a life after death. In previous episodes, I have focused on the claims about God, particularly on the claim that God exists. I have unpacked two conclusive arguments for the existence of God, an argument from the contingency of the universe, and another argument from the fact that the universe began to exist. But if you have followed the arguments closely, you will see that they don't actually prove that God exists. Rather, what they actually prove is that a necessary being exists. Is the concept of God the same as the concept of a necessary being? No, it's not. God is more than just a necessary being. God is omnipotent, all-powerful in other words. He's omniscient, all-knowing in other words. He answers our prayers, He deserves our worship, and He is alone in His Godhood. Proving the existence of a necessary being is part of the proof for the existence of God, but it is not the complete proof. The argument needs to go further. In the Western tradition, the argument of choice for the existence of God has historically been the argument from contingency, not the argument from the beginning of the universe, as I explained in previous episodes. The Catholic philosopher and theologian Thomas Aquinas famously concluded his exposition of the argument with the words, "And that," the necessary being in other words, "is what most people call God." Because he didn't take the argument far enough, the most common objection in the Western tradition, the favorite objection of Western philosophers to his argument, is that proving the existence of a necessary being is not the same as proving the existence of God. In the Muslim tradition, however, the argument does not stop here. Proving the existence of a necessary being is the first step towards proving the existence of God. The second step is to prove that God is also someone with agency, someone who has volition, someone who created the universe through his free will, knowledge, and power. God is a necessary being who is alive and acts by his free volition. The goal of this presentation is to show that the necessary being whose existence I have conclusively proved in previous episodes, to prove that that necessary being is also a volitional agent. Let me first clarify what I mean by volitional agent. Historically, people have believed in two kinds of necessary beings: a necessary being who is not a volitional agent, and a necessary being who is. A necessary being who is not a volitional agent is an inert, involuntary, and necessary cause of the universe. This necessary being is an involuntary cause for the existence of the universe, just as fire is an inert and involuntary cause for the generation of heat to boil water in a pot, for example. This is the kind of quote-unquote God that non-religious philosophers such as Aristotle in the Greek tradition and Avicenna in the Islamic tradition have historically argued for. This is also the God-like concept of Mother Nature that many scientists hold in reverence and awe. A necessary being who is a volitional agent, on the other hand, is not an inert, involuntary cause of the universe. Rather, he is someone who is alive, who made everything in the universe with an independent, free choice, and who could have made everything differently or not made anything at all. This is what people of religion, Muslims, Christians, Jews, mean when they use the word God. Their God is not the lifeless cause of the universe that philosophers like Aristotle believed in. Their God is a volitional agent. I will now show why the necessary being on whom the universe depends is not just a necessary being, but a necessary being who is also a volitional agent. The reason why the necessary being must be a volitional agent is that it is impossible for an involuntary cause to bring about both an effect and its opposite. Fire, for example, is an involuntary cause of heating a pot to boil water. It is therefore impossible for it to also cool the pot to freeze the water. An involuntary cause cannot choose to do one thing at one time and another thing at another. An involuntary cause always brings about the same effect. A force that acts on an object, such as a car, is an involuntary cause for speeding it up. It is therefore impossible for that force to also cause the car to slow down. An involuntary cause always brings about the same effect. It is impossible for an involuntary cause to bring about both an effect and its opposite. Now, what this means is that if the necessary being was an involuntary cause of the universe, then the universe would be one big homogeneous blob. But if we look at the universe, that is not what we see. We don't see homogeneity, we see variety. I'd like you to recall from previous episodes the Quranic verse that draws our attention to the heavens and earth, the night and day, the ships that sail the sea, the rain, the vegetation, the animals, the winds, the clouds, as signs for the existence of God. This is one of dozens of verses that demonstrate that the universe is evidence for the existence of God. The God who these verses are giving evidence for is not just a necessary being. These verses are giving evidence for the existence of a God who is a necessary being and also a volitional agent. How is the universe evidence for God's volitional agency? By its variety. Remember that it is impossible for an involuntary cause to bring about both an effect and its opposite. These verses draw our attention to the fact that the necessary being who made the universe makes both an effect and its opposite. This verse, for example, doesn't just draw our attention to animals as a sign for the existence of God. It draws our attention to animals of all kinds. God did not just make one kind of animal, but millions of different species of animals. The other contingent things mentioned in the verse are also variegated. Night is different from day. Ships are variegated in their construction and in their voyages over sea. Rain varies from place to place and from season to season. The vegetation that it produces is diverse. Winds are always changing. And every cloud in the sky is different from every other cloud. The contingent variety in the universe is evidence that the necessary being who made it is also a volitional agent. This is a frequently mentioned argument in the Quran. Here, for example, are a dozen other verses that cite the variety of the things in the universe as evidence for God's volitional agency. Here's another one. In this verse, God tells us that He is the original creator of the heavens and the earth. Original creator is my attempted translation of the Arabic word Badir, which Quranic exegetes explain means the one who creates differently every time. Every human being is different. Every snowflake is different. Every fingerprint is different. Every leaf is different. Every grain of sand is different. The stunning variety in the universe is not just evidence for the fact that God has volition, but that He has unrestricted volition. He can choose to do anything at all. That is why the verse continues to say that whenever He decrees a thing, He but says to it, be, and it is. No effort, no difficulty. God can do anything. The things in the universe are not like the mass-produced identical goods that come out of a volitionless factory line. Everything in the universe was custom made by an independent free choice. God, therefore, is not a necessary being who is the volitionless cause of the universe. God is a necessary being who is a volitional agent. وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم.
صل وسلم ربي وأنعم على المعلم